All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Derek Wallace. He is the Vice President of Marketing over at the LoRa Alliance, and today we're going to talk about technology and IoT and all the cool capabilities and the Alliance. But before we get into all of that fun tech stuff, Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to the LoRa Alliance?
Sure. So again, my name is Derek. Hello, everyone. I've been involved in technology and marketing and sales and product management for over 20 years. I came to LoRaWAN and IoT. Actually, I started when I worked at Multitech, which is a big player in the communications M2M and IoT space. I was director of product management, and I managed the LoRaWAN portfolio for Multitech, among other things. That was my first introduction. That was back in 2015. And then I joined the LoRa Alliance this past year, a year ago, actually. And so I've been working technology. I've worked in several countries, London, Copenhagen, Sydney, and different places in the US. And I like technology. I like technology that actually helps and makes a positive impact in the world. And personally, I love to travel. I mean, I dig traveling, absolutely. And what some people don't know is I played and coached Ultimate Frisbee for many, many, many years, having coached beginning teams up through national teams and those other places I lived in as well.
That's me. Pretty cool. That's going to be the coolest thing we talk about, isn't it? Because I've never heard of that. That's awesome. Well, Derek, why don't, we'd love to kind of talk about the background, the LoRaWAN background and its role in IoT and IoT's capabilities. Why don't we talk a little bit about that for the audience?
Sure. So LoRaWAN is a communication protocol. It's a wireless communication protocol. And in the Internet of Things, basically, if you have things out there in the world, they need some way to get to the Internet. And it's communication that enables that. And there's lots of different forms of communication technologies out there. LoRaWAN is actually ideally suited and is perfect for IoT, because IoT, especially in the massive scale, sensors out in the world, many billions of sensors, there are difficulties in IoT in connecting those sensors, whether there are things already out there in the world, whether it's like bridges or water pipes or soil monitoring and occupancy and healthcare and all. I mean, there's so many different use cases, but often where you want to put those sensors are in difficult to reach places. So they could be very long distance. They could be in places with no other communication technology that can have the range. They could be underground. They could be buried in cement. They could be high up on a pole, places where you don't want to have to touch those things for 10 years, or it's very difficult to reach them. So if you think of your cell phone, if you go in a basement or you get on an elevator back in the days when we were all out and about in the world, you're going to lose connectivity. And that's because that wireless communication can't get through. And then if you're putting things out there, they need to be able to last a very long time on batteries, especially the sensor type applications. Because again, if you have a parking sensor, lots of smart city applications use parking throughout the world. Those things will be buried underground. So once you bury them under cement, you don't want to touch those things for many years. So those things are not going to have a power source. So they need batteries. So those are three really big constraints in connecting things out in the world. So whether it's low power consumption, whether it's very low cost, or whether it's range or distance or penetrating things, LoRaWAN as a protocol and the LoRa technology it's built upon, that was created to solve those and other problems with connecting IoT things in the world back to the cloud.
So what's the distance that they go? Because I know these are used for like cattle, like you see a lot of it being used in agriculture areas. So what's the distance that it's actually capable of, pulling information from a sensor or a tracking device or whatever the case is?
Absolutely. Yep. So there's a couple things, and it does depend, which people hate that answer, but the world is, complex.
An engineering answer.
Yeah. So the engineering answer is if you have line of sight, direct line of sight from your gateway, which is where the sensors will send the information to the sensor that's out in the world, you can get 10 miles plus very easily. There's no obstruction. If you're in an urban environment like a city, like where we all live in, and you're going through buildings and metal and cement and glass, you can get up to 2 to 3 miles. Now, what was interesting is I just did this webinar for China a couple nights ago. It was like middle of the night for me. And this question came up, and Alper, who is our technical committee chair, he was like, "Yep, Derek, those are great answers. That's all true in the distance." But then he said something that kind of blew my mind because I'm not an engineer. He's like, "If you're not dealing with the Earth's curvature, well, now you're talking hundreds of miles of connectivity." So from a satellite down to the Earth, I mean, we've got applications that are doing that today. And it depends, on, so the it depends part is how often are you sending data? How much data are you sending? How far away? What are you going through? So you can get much further than what I just told you, the 10 miles plus in line of sight, 2 to 3 miles within an urban environment. Sometimes you get less. It just depends on really real world factors, but it is leading link budget, which link budget is going to tell you how far your signal is going and how strong it is going through objects. It's the best in the LPWAN space, and LoRaWAN is a LPWAN, which stands for Low Power Wide Area Network Technology.
Now, you mentioned also it being used in medical, and I've seen it being used a lot in like I said, like agriculture and things like that, and very rural. So how's it being used in medical, especially with everything going on?
I have a feeling you're going to get into my question that I was going to ask about.
All right.
This is what I was going to go with, because to that point, we were reading the end of your report, and Donna Moore had talked about, she said a lot of the members, brought up solutions related to COVID-19. So I was wondering what types of solutions those might be, and I think it might tie into what Brian's asking.
So I'll nail both of your questions together. There's lots of different examples, but I'll start with the medical. So actually, the COVID-19 actually started back in March, April, when COVID-19 was really hitting the world. And governments were starting to make calls for help, technology help to fight COVID-19. And back then, we really understood very, very little about COVID. So if you may remember when Spain and Italy were getting just decimated by the virus, they put out calls for help, like official, RFQs or the public sector version of that sort of thing. Governments in Africa did the same thing, and a couple other places. So I started working with my members and sharing and saying, hey, they're looking for help. And so we started, individually communicating with the members, but then I realized we need to create a page. And if actually go to our website, we have a COVID-19 section where it's a whole bunch of different use cases of us telling the world, hey, there are solutions to help COVID-19. Here they are if you want to know more about them, and several of them are free. Our members just said, hey, we know people need help. Here's the information. Here's how to contact the people who are delivering these solutions. So that's how it all started. Now to get to your question about medical. So there's actually several ways. So with COVID-19 in particular, there is lots of proximity detection in terms of, are we staying, 6 feet or more apart? What was the occupancy of a room? Were there a lot of people in that room? It helps with contact tracing, which, sports leagues, as you know, in this country and others are really using that to try to make sure they can get through seasons. But just from the public at large, it's, okay, are there areas that are overpopulated? It's helping with individuals know what's safe. It's also helping with local and regional governments with public policy of deciding where people should and shouldn't go. That's just one example. Another example is lots of great predictive cleaning solutions, and also proving that spaces within hospitals or other public places have been cleaned, when they've been cleaned, or do they need to be cleaned. So Microshare, one of our member companies, they have a great solution for this, for helping hospitals around the world to make sure that they can be very, very efficient and turn rooms over quickly and use the limited overstretched resources that they have in the most efficient way to be able to serve as many people in a hospital, but proving and showing that it's clean. Another way with LoRaWAN, which is great because LoRaWAN has a unique ability to be able to use as a public network, but also a private network. Private networks are great because you can put them up wherever you want. So one example of this is a couple of our member companies help the city of Madrid put up temporary hospitals because the stationary physical hospitals were overwhelmed. So they needed more space. They don't have enough communication and other infrastructure within your pop-up hospital that's in a tent. So
Mhm.
LoRaWAN helps enable communication from the beds in the hospitals to the nursing stations, wherever they are, to share information. And another one is oxygen cylinders. I'm just going on, but
No, this is interesting.
So another company, Cavenon Group, it's an Italian company, they create a solution that monitors the quality of oxygen in the oxygen cylinders and also the amount of oxygen. So there's no guessing of how much oxygen is left, and is that oxygen of the right quality. With LoRaWAN connected to them, it's sending the data, and so people know exactly when to change them to get the most oxygen out of that, because we know how much the ventilators need to use to help people breathe. And then also making sure that the quality of the oxygen in the cylinders are correct. Dementia, now this isn't really LoRaWAN specific, but one of the questions that you'd ask is really interesting use cases for LoRaWAN in the medical space. So we have a member company called CareBand. They have just a great solution with helping with dementia. This can be used not only in urban populations, but another question that you had was rural areas. So it's how are elderly people who are either on their own or in a nursing home or wherever, have they fallen over? Are they displaying anxiety? How are their social interactions? Are they getting lost? It's amazing how often people with dementia just get lost. They're not where they're supposed to be, and people don't know. And you can even take that over to cattle, because Brian, you mentioned something about cattle, but I can talk about that another time. So there's just, that's just a taste of medical applications of LoRaWAN out there in the world.
So to go back to that application example of monitoring, let's say, people in a room, those sensors need to be in a room, right? You need to keep those sensors, or something that's in a smartphone, or how does that, how are they used?
It'd be a combination. So now you're going to ask for really specific details, and I'm only going to be able to give you kind of like a general. So yes, you'd have tags. We would wear a tag or a badge of some sort, or something where the LoRaWAN sensor can be. And then that sensor will communicate, determining how the application is written, how often. So the three of us are in a room together. We have a badge. That badge can monitor, plot our locations. And then with the other technologies and with apps, then we can show that, yes, we geofence the 6 feet around ourselves. And then when we cross that geofence, then we have violated that space. The data gets sent from the badge, which is attached to us via LoRaWAN, and that'll be sent to a gateway, which will then be sent to the analytics platform, or the data visual platform that crunches all the data, has a dashboard, has the alerts and all that stuff. That can also be sent to a cell phone, or your app on your phone. Now there are problems. There are some cellular-based versions of the same idea, but the cellular has the problems of penetrating rooms. And there's also a cost and access to everyone who can't afford a cellular plan. So MicroShare's solution in particular for this contact tracing has like the details and would actually do a much better job of explaining the details than I just did for why it's innovative a solution in terms of accuracy, in terms of frequency, in terms of cost, and in terms of availability.
Okay, so I have some cool ideas. What if all right, so how we want to do trade shows and want to have events again eventually, right? So couldn't you, everybody wears a badge, right? So instead of giving people an actual badge, like, hey, wear this, it's just kind of embedded in your badge, right? Like your name tag. And so then you can see how many people are in the event and keep them spaced out. And then you could still have life as usual, right? So isn't that cool?
We're going to do that very thing. So we were going to have our big, massive LoRaWAN World Expo in Paris. First, it was June of last year. Then we had to move it to December. And we were going to use our technology to do that, and with our members who are creating those solutions, because you absolutely can do that. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. Unfortunately, you have a couple of things. You've got government policy. So for a long time, France banned gatherings of over 1,000 people. And then you've got people's just comfort traveling. So you may be good and great in the trade show, but then what happens when you go out to, you're done with the trade show and there's thousands of you, you know. But yes, and that's absolutely something that members are doing in different ways and that we will be doing for our trade shows.
Got another one. Okay, so you know when you go to the supermarket, all right, so if we put those sensors on the shopping carts, then you can kind of gauge if somehow there was some app or something that tells you how many people are in the supermarket. Maybe, you know, instead of waiting on that long line outside of the supermarket for an hour and a half to get in, you could kind of gauge when is a good time to go and not have to wait, or when is it not overcrowded, and space out your shopping. I like that. I'm being a little selfish.
There's nothing to prevent that solution from being deployed, because members offer the tools. Some members offer the tools to do that. Then it's a question of, does the supermarket, you know, do they care enough to invest in that to make your user experience better? Or they're like, yeah, you can suck it up and stay outside in the rain for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Shout out to Target if you're listening, please.
Yeah, or shout out to like some shopping cart manufacturer out there, right? You know.
Exactly. So you said Target. You mentioned Target. So they are actually a member of the LoRa Alliance, and I know they're doing some really interesting things with LoRaWAN. Now, I can't speak on behalf of them, and I won't. But what I would say is just stay tuned to see what they develop and what they roll out with LoRaWAN and how that could improve your user experience outside and inside Target.
That's pretty cool. I'm excited because we're Target fans over here.
We have a targeted.
So now we talked a little bit about how it's being used in sort of like more urban environments. I know you said we're going to bring back to the catalog because that's what I started this with, the rural environments, right? So what are some of the things being done in rural areas, you know, for farming or you know?
Farming is a massive. Yeah, farming is a big vertical that LoRaWAN is very active in because of those things of distance, of being able to penetrate, you know, the plants in a dense, like vineyards or crops, you know, corn or whatever, the vast distances of some big farms. You talked about the cattle. There's not only applications being used to track cattle. I remember actually when I was at Multitech talking to a company and like, you know, dude ranchers, and how long it takes a cowboy to find missing cattle on a 100 square acre, you know, if the fence is breached and the cattle gets out, or they're just wandering around in a place, they get lost from the herd, that could take a cowboy half a day to a day to find that cow. So there are applications for, again, tags on a cow using LoRaWAN to connect to the gateways to then to plot where those cows are, saving lots of time. Also, if the fence is breached with an accelerometer, you can tell the position of something. And if the fence is breached, you know, I got to go at mile 32 and a half, I better go fix that part of the fence. So that's one application. And even staying with cows, there's a lot of things with health and well-being of cows being used. So you've got these sensors, and it's like kind of a capsule thingy that cows ingest, and within that sensor, there's a whole bunch of other things that can tell you the vitals of the cow, and that's great, but you need to be able to communicate that information, and LoRaWAN communicates that information. So you can tell if cow is sick pretty much as soon as it's happening, and then isolate it from the rest of the cattle so you're not endangering the rest of the cattle. You can tell if that cow is pregnant right away, and then figure out how to treat the cow and the fetus better. You can tell, are they eating right? Are they eating enough? You know, all that stuff. That's another use case. Soil, moisture, nutrients, radiation from the sun. There's all these different things that farmers really care about so they can get the best yield and not over farm areas or under farm areas or over fertilized areas. Or with precision agriculture, I attended a conference in Montreal by International Association of Precision Agriculture. I mean, really, really brilliant people doing really, really amazing things. I mean, plotting in great detail a bunch of factors for improving yield and sustainable farming and stuff like that. But the one thing I noticed was the way of getting that data was very inefficient and data and manual intensive by these farmers. They'd be sending people out, you know, manual, going out and checking and reading, and you'd have inaccurate results. And you'd take a long time to get the data. And then that data was good, you know, 20 hours ago when that person was out there. So LoRaWAN is helping lots of use cases and around the farm, whether it's plant, whether it's bio, whether it's whatever, to get that data out. I can keep going for other rural examples.
I have a question. So all these things we're talking about, you know, the technology that's transferring the information, right? How much is AI playing a factor into analyzing that data? A lot of that's being done by AI, and how closely related is that?
So it's very related. In fact, it's the key thing for making IoT valuable. So it's great you can get data from out in the world. I mean, and LoRaWAN is incredibly useful for those use cases I talked about with distance and cost and power consumption. But getting the data, just having that data, if you're not doing anything, that data that's making a difference, then what's the point? Why go through all that effort? So AI or data analytics, whether it's at the edge, whether it's in the cloud, it really does matter. And it also, you know, different verticals and different use cases have different needs of data. They need to be able to figure out, glean different bits of information where that they actually can take that phrase actionable, you know, actionable intelligence or whatever that phrase is. And so AI matters. And it's for me, it's still nascent in IoT. It's definitely growing. We have members that have, you know, the platforms, you know, you go on your computer and you access their platform. They're providing more and more information. More players are getting into AI, and it's all about taking that raw data, making sense of it, and writing in a way that's valuable so people can actually make decisions. And those decisions could be shut off the valve, increase the fertilizer, send somebody over to help the elderly person, or in the transport of water, we've got hundreds of miles of piping. And now we know that these 5 areas, we know exactly where the leak's been happening. And now we understand the frequency, and these patterns kind of tell us information that can make us improve the infrastructure delivering that water. I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but the point is that it's creating data that people can make valuable decisions to solve problems out in the world.
So we're talking about agriculture, medical. What about businesses? I mean, how can businesses kind of tap into that data to improve their efficiency, right? How are they?
So with businesses, you know, getting data, getting real-time data helps in lots of ways. It helps in creating new business or new service offerings. It helps in increasing efficiencies, reducing costs, improving compliance. So there's, like, if you think of industrial kitchens, for example, they need to prove that the freezer door, refrigerator door was always closed, that the temperature always stayed within a range, that the amount of cleaning solution that they used in the different areas was done properly, was done at the intervals that they're supposed to be done. And previously, you know, those are very manual jobs and with lots of inaccuracies. Well, getting real access to data lets you know, yep, I know that my cold storage, not just with food, but medicine, and that's actually another COVID-19 application of showing that the whole transport train and storage train of medicine has always been kept within the cold storage requirements. And so you can have a continual track of information to show it every minute, every hour, whatever your interval that you want, what the actual data was at that time. And that lets you show with compliance officers, yep, you know, we have been compliant the whole time. From a new services perspective, you know, restaurants spend a lot of money trying to make sure that their dryer or their fryers, the areas around them are clean, but also the quality of the oil is clean when that needs to be changed out, or when food that has been put under heating lamps, when that should be changed out because it's kind of expired or not as fresh or as tasty. So you've got companies that utilize LoRaWAN solutions to go talk to these restaurants and say, hey, we can deploy a solution for you that automates all that. We'll give you great dashboards of information. We'll help you set alarms to when to clean, when to change your fryers. want to do a whole bunch of other things so you can focus your core resources on what you do best, which is serving the food and serving the customers out in the store, instead of spending more of your time doing infrastructure related things that are costly and may still be very inefficient using your own resources. And ways that businesses can tap. So let's think of, you talked about Target. Hypothetically, you've got shelves, you know, with lots and lots of different, you know, goods, and those shelves will go empty from time to time, right? Some more than others. Some may be better, sell better if they're positioned in a different place. Well, previously, a lot of that could be very, very manual. And so a store like Target, now I'm not saying they're doing this, but a use case could be, all right, I've got sensors on all these places. I know at the store, at the aisle level, what's happening, which that's not always real time. We know in the warehouse that they got plenty of real time information, but getting it from the warehouse or the offsite storage onto the shelf in a very efficient way, so that when you go to look for whatever thing that you love to buy at Target and it's not there, Target doesn't have to worry about that anymore, because they know, yep, I'm like 3 items away from being depleted. I better go fill that. Because when you look at a whole footprint of Target store, unless you have that information, you're sending people around at intervals to figure out what's low and what's not low. That's not really efficient. So there's lots of ways. It always comes down to the use case. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then how can you solve it? And LoRaWAN for businesses, and if you look at our smart businesses use LoRaWAN video, that will show you some really good examples of different verticals and how businesses can use LoRaWAN to solve their unique problems depending on the vertical. And obviously, you can always contact the LoRa Alliance, contact me, go to our website, and look at our ecosystem, or where you're at in the world. What is your problem that you're trying to solve, and who provides solutions in those areas to help solve your problem?
So I got one more question, because now you made me start thinking robotics or autonomous vehicles. How is it being used in robotics and sort of autonomous?
So, yeah. So now this is where LoRaWAN is not the right technology for, say, autonomous vehicles, in terms of at least what I think you're meaning. So with autonomous vehicles, and you see this, like, it's been in mining for a while now, for years, especially in Australia. You got these huge mines, you got these big machines, and so, you know, these big trucks going inside, pulling the mining materials out, and blah, blah, blah. Now, to automate those things, and autonomous vehicles, you know, in the public, like Uber was trialing out, and other places in England were trialing out. They need massive amounts of data, big pipes. It needs to be instant as well, and continuous. Now, LoRaWAN it transfers much smaller amounts of package. So that's why sensor-based applications, applications where you're not sending much video. So you're not sending voice, you're not sending video, you're not sending huge amounts of data at once, because LoRaWAN was not designed for that. There are other technologies that do that. And that's another very, very important thing about IoT. So LoRaWAN is a great technology. It solves a lot of issues or challenges in connecting things out in the world, but it doesn't solve for everything. And there's no technology out there that solves for every single IoT use case. So generally what we say is, if you got massive IoT, sensor-based things, something waking up and saying, hey, I got some data, I'm going to send it, or getting pinged and say, hey, turn this valve on, turn the sprinkler on, turn it off. Providing data once a minute, once every 5 minutes, once an hour, once a day. That's bursty, short data. LoRaWAN's perfect for that. If you want something where it's video, streaming data, you know, like you may do on your phone, or we're doing right now, those are big data pipes. And LoRaWAN wasn't designed for that. It's not meant to solve those kinds of problems.
Okay. I have one final question for you.
Okay.
About security, because I mean,
yeah.
I can imagine that this is a topic of concern. And I was going to originally ask about, you know, how do we keep this all secure and everybody's data secure? But I had read something on the site about device implementation. And I wanted to understand a little bit more about what that meant.
Sure. So, and by the way, if you go back to the site, we just switched over our website hosting partner last Friday, and over the weekend we were having the change. So the link that you tried works now. So go back and check that out. So implementation matters. Security is a constantly evolving target. There's always different and changing attack vectors. And you can't say, I'm secure and you're done. It's not like that. LoRaWAN is very secure. Lots of wireless protocols are secure. LoRaWAN has been designed with security from the beginning. However, no matter what your technology is, doesn't matter. If you have poor implementation, you're gonna basically negate all the great inbuilt security. So from LoRaWAN, when we talk about implementation matters, we're talking about best practices for implementation, and we talk about it from a technical perspective, a common sense perspective, and what's your people policy perspective with data. So from a technical perspective, we talk about, make sure that when you set up your keys, that they're not in easy to find locations. They're not publicly available. When you create keys, and keys are basically in wireless communication, they're the things that match up, like one side to the other side. They say, yep, our keys match, so we'll now go ahead and communicate. Keys, that's a really, really basic high level. An engineer would just slap me for that. But anyway, these keys, they need to be very difficult to guess. Don't make keys that are very easy. Don't go, oh, for my fifth sensor that's out there, the key that's associated with this fifth sensor, I'm going to call 2005. And now, oh, the sixth sensor, it's now 2006 and 2007. People can guess that easily. So from a technical perspective, the tools that exist, IEEE and there are other conventions, use the good best practices of your keys, of how long you have sessions open in your network. I wrote some notes. I want to take, I know you're going to ask this question. And so I know a lot about security. I don't know a bunch about technical. Make sure that when you set up a delivery system, a technical delivery system, it's secure from end to end. So when you look at from a sensor to the gateway, to the cloud, to then, maybe AWS, their cloud platform that you go in and look at the data, each point along that, those are attack vectors or attack surfaces where people can take advantage. So you want to make sure that every part of that end-to-end chain is secure. And there's lots of technical software and hardware tools out there to make sure that each point of data at the edge, when it's in transit, and for that first part, that's LoRaWAN, we're very, very secure protocol. When it rests at the gateway, when it's transferred to the cloud, when it's sitting at the cloud, waiting to be, make sure that that piece is protected as well. So make sure that each piece is protected. So you can use things like hardware secure elements, tamper-proof tools, a root of trust or an area of trust within your software development package on your gateway or on the device, where it's very, very hard, even if you got into the device, you couldn't get into the actual development area where all that great data is. Again, that's a really bad explanation from a technical perspective, but again, it solves the purpose. So that's technical. And then from best practice, just common sense. If you've got your keys or you got your passwords, don't leave them out where anybody can see them. Don't have your spreadsheet that anyone can see that. Don't put your gateway or
don't publish it into the cloud.
Exactly. Don't do, and people do this. Don't have your password be admin. Don't take the tools that exist.
Now, Derek.
Exactly. Do things that are common sense that say, oh, I got this gateway, so I'm not going to put it where the 1,000 people who just walk by it have access to it. I'm going to put it in a place where it's going to solve the needs, but only the authorized people I want that have access to the different elements can get access to those elements. And then lastly, from your people policy perspective, are your employees taking data out of the room? Do you make it easy for them to literally put data on a stick and take it outside? or transfer, make sure you have policies, and there's plenty of standards bodies that show best practices to say that, yeah, you're using this great technology and you've done most of everything that we recommend. And so it's very, very secure. But then you let Mr. Smith out there walk out the door and he's got all the secrets and all the information to access your network. So you just negated everything you just did.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy how and so much of it is just basic common sense. Like just think about it for a few seconds and
Exactly. I mean, you wouldn't do these things in your own home. So why are you going to do this on this massive scale when other people, and then you actually have liability that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, that made perfect sense to me. Thank you for breaking it down.
Change your password. No admin. No admin.
No, I can go change my password after this. Well, Derek, we really, really appreciate you coming on and talking to us today. Can you let everybody know where they can check out LoRa Alliance or more about you? I'm actually going to put a link to that security article in this in the description.
Great.
Here. You can see it as well.
Yeah. So you can always find me on LinkedIn, Derek Wallace at the LoRa Alliance. And to learn much more about LoRa Alliance, LoRaWAN, the technology, and obviously our hundreds of members around the world and the great work that they're doing and the different solutions they have that can help you, you can go to our website, which is www.LoRa-alliance.org for tons of information.